Welcome to today's scene study of the film Brooklyn. So I want to look at a monologue, do a text analysis from an actor's perspective, but also I love doing this from the perspective of I love films, I love movies, and looking at one piece of text, especially if it's at the end of a film, it gives you kind of a great idea of what the story is about. You sometimes see a full circle moment. So I love doing this. And this is a film which is based on a book. So if you haven't read the book or if you haven't seen the film, there will be a lot of spoilers because I will go into details. And this is literally the last scene. So, the entire story will need to be understood in order to understand what's going on there. So you have been warned. All right, so first of all, what's important is to understand the context of what this is. So in the story, we are looking at Alice Lacey, and she lives in Ireland in a small town, village, and immigrates to Brooklyn, America, New York in the 1950s, 1951 to be specific. And she builds a new life for herself there, meets friends, gets a job, and then eventually meets someone she falls in love with, Tony. They start building their lives. It starts to feel more like a home to her. But then her sister, Rose, passes away back in Ireland. So she wants to go back over, see her mother, see how things are going, support her mother. And before that, Tony asks her to get married, and she agrees to that. But she's a bit hesitant. And then she goes back to Ireland for a while and integrates her there, but she doesn't tell anyone that she's married. It's a very small town. It's a different mindset, and there's many things going through her head. And one of her friends sets her up with another person, which is Jim, and she starts liking Jim, so she starts to be a bit conflicted about that. But in the end, she tells them, I'm married, and tells her mother she's married to Tony, and goes back to America because she realized that this is where her actual home is. This is where she's happy. This is where she wants to be. And this monologue is basically she gets on the ship back to America. A young woman approaches her and asks her for advice. And so it's a full circle moment because in the beginning of the film, she got advice from her cabin maid, Georgina. So it's a full circle moment. And before I go more into the text analysis, let's just look at the text itself. Okay. You have to think like an American. You feel so homesick that you want to die. And there's nothing you can do about it apart from endure it. But you will, and it won't kill you. And one day the sun will come out. You might not even notice straight away. It'll be faint. And then you catch yourself thinking about something or someone who has no connection with the past, someone who's only yours, and you realize that this is where your life is. Now we know where the story sits, and now we want to further build the foundation so you can kind of build upon that. I find a foundation always really helpful. Sometimes you just need to know it and then put it to the side. But it is good to know the world that you're living in. And first, what I like to do is I ask myself the 7 questions from Stanislavski. So first is, who am I? So I'm Alice Lacey. Then where am I? I'm on a boat. I'm on the boat on my way back to America. And then it's, what time is it? It can of course allude to what time of day, what time of the week, depending, but it's also really important when you do a time period piece, so you understand kind of the mindset that character would have been in, the restrictions that character would have had at that time, depending on how it kind of set in realism this story is set in, and it's in the 1950s. So of course, a different mindset that was instilled in women, different expectations that women had, and that kind of informs who Alice is. And for women in the 1950s, immigrating to America immigrating to another country is always it is a big step. But for a woman by herself in the 1950s, I think it informs us that Alice is a very feisty character, that she's someone who takes risks and doesn't fully conform to society or what is expected of her. And that kind of helps you inform like what kind of person she is, right? Then the next one is, what do I want? So this text in itself, it's the ending, it just describes a bit like the text, like the monologue itself turns into a voiceover. So there are no high emotions, there's no high drama or no high stakes from the outside. So it for me, it needs a different approach. It needs a bit more gentleness. So I try to have more kind of gentle objectives, right? So my objective is, what do I want? I want the young woman, to feel okay. And why do I want that? Because I like being kind to people and I want to pass on the knowledge that has been given to me, kind of a full circle, and to be useful and kind to someone. How will I get what I want? It's by being honest, by being truthful. And what must I overcome? To not be afraid of being vulnerable. Because if you want to fully, like, if you have a message that you want someone to take on, the other person to fully understand that message, of course you have to be honest, and that you have to be vulnerable about your experiences, and passing that on, can not always be that easy. So that is a kind of perspective you can play, right? Because all of these things are things that you can play, that you can experiment with. Sometimes it's fun to create several different objectives, to just have different approaches, because you want to stay kind of fluid in your acting, in your approach, and be able, have someone be able to direct you, so you're not like set in just one way. And of course, there's various different ways, various different objectives you can find here. These are just examples. Also, great questions I always like to ask myself is, where am I coming from, like directly, and where am I going directly? And where's she coming from? She's just coming from having stood up to Mrs. Kelly, who has always been a bit of a bully, and said, "Yeah, I'm married, I'm happy in America," and also, telling that to her mum, and realizing that she has changed. Because if you're someone who has maybe moved from one place to another, especially if you move from one country to another, I've moved from one country to another. So that is a big step. And you still sometimes feel, okay, I'm still kind of that person. I'm still kind of, this is kind of still my home, but this is also my new home. And then at some point, your old home becomes more your new home. But as a person, culturally, you're still in between, but coming to terms with, hey, I know this might have been my home, and in some sense it still is, but this is also my new home, and this is where I want to be, this is where I'm choosing to be. So she made the choice to be in her new home, and having that realization that's okay, to be torn between places, or have memories and have your heart in several different places, but deciding on one place where you want to be happy, where you are happy, and going there. So this is where she's come from. Also realizing I've grown as a person, I can stand up for myself, I have found who I am. Having that as a growth journey is also really interesting, realizing that. I think that's why I personally really love this film, and also love this monologue, and it really speaks to me, because I have a lot of personal experiences in terms of moving country and what that's like, right? And that can also be helpful to use your own experiences. I'll go into that in a minute. And where is she going? She's going back to Tony. You know, she has realized it was the right decision to marry him. She loves him, and this is where she wants to be. And also the excitement of that, and the relief of that, because 1950s, if you marry someone, divorce wasn't as, you wouldn't do that very often, so there wouldn't be really that much of an option. So having married someone, being like, okay, this was actually the right decision, because before she wasn't quite sure. So that is also a feeling of relief, feeling like, yeah, I've made the right decision. I'm spending my life with the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, which is a big decision, right? So the relief of that. And that's kind of where she is, right? And then if we look at the text, because she talks to that young woman about her experience and impresses her experience on that woman, says, this is what I've experienced, and this may be of help to you, may be of use to you. So this is a lot connected with memories. So what you can do here is to either take the memories, experiences the character has gone through and insert them into that, or you use your own experiences, or kind of a mixture of both, or you come up, you just invent something, whatever is helpful for you. And for me, what I mainly chose is for this text to use my own experiences, because I have moved country and I just felt that was the most powerful, that invoked the most emotions, that was the most fun approach for me as well, because even if a text is sometimes serious, there can still be fun in there. I want to find the fun, I want to find the joy in the text, and that was kind of the thing for me. So what you want to do is look at each sentence and look at specific words, and what you can then do is take that sentence or take that word, write that down, and then write down the kind of feeling or the thing that it means to you in real life, um, and that kind of what emotion you want to be invoked there, and maybe any kind of memories that you can connect to that. So it's the people, places, things, where you just connect one word that maybe doesn't really mean anything to you in real life, but connect it to something that actually means something to you, so then that word will come more to life. That's one approach you can use, and especially with memories. And another thing you want to do with memories, or can do, is you place them in different parts of the room. When we think about something, we look sometimes up or down, like different emotions. We have to look around for those in our heads. And, if you have a conversation, of course, you don't always look directly at the person. Sometimes you look a bit around to think of something, right? So that makes it feel natural, and will sometimes make it easier for you to also place that emotion there, even if you just look for a moment there to that emotion, or if you know that emotion, that memory is there. So you still look at the person, but in your peripheral vision, you see it to your side. And that can also be really, really helpful to then remember why you're speaking the text. And that just makes it more livable, more breathable. So now if we look at the text, is you have to think like an American. So you have to think like this new person, you have to bring confidence, so that you are allowed in, that you can go through the border, and think like an American is something that Georgina said exactly to her at the beginning. So that is also, I think, a wonderful nugget put in by the writer, and by the kind of creative team of the film, to have a full circle moment. Like somebody said to her, think like an American, then she passes that on, think like an American. And I just love finding those little nuggets where it's, full circle moment. And then it's, you feel so homesick that you want to die. It's just homesick. What's the feeling of homesick? I'm sure every person to a degree has felt that. And the word homesick is very important here, so you can kind of connect that to a memory, or to something that you create, that you want to die. And there's nothing you can do about it apart from endure it. Like, that's just that. Sometimes you just have to, get through it, but you will, and it won't kill you. At the end of the tunnel, there's always a light. And the kind of sentence where she says, it won't kill you, is, you can say it more seriously, or you can take it more as like a joke. Like, it's hard, but it's not the worst thing. You'll get over it. Like, you'll be fine. And just make a bit of joke of like such a serious situation. And then one day the sun will come out. You might not even notice straight away. It'll be faint. So the sun kind of symbolizes here something, just in general, things get better. and you don't always realize it, but you feel it underneath. And then when you look back years later, it's like, oh yeah, this is where things started to get better. This is where I started to feel like this is my home. And on this text, I worked with my acting coach, and she said, okay, what was something for you that you noticed in the beginning when you moved to London? And after my first year, I moved somewhere else. And when I walked home, like from the tube station, there were like a lot of foxes at night. And I love foxes. I have a fox tattoo. And that, like, just seeing them make me happy. Or when I like see a random cat somewhere, it's like, oh, that's a cat, that's cute. And it's just something small. It's not something that you normally be like, oh yeah, if I see a fox there, that means I feel at home. But for me, it felt a bit like that, and it was kind of a sign, and it made me feel more at ease and made me feel like, yeah, I made the right decision moving here. It doesn't really rationally make sense, but emotionally it makes sense. And this is, I think, a lot about emotions and trusting that kind of journey, or maybe you find a coffee shop that you always go to, stuff like that, and it just makes it like feel like, yeah, I'm putting my roots in here. This is becoming my home. And then you catch yourself thinking about something or someone who has no connection with the past, and there's something, can be a job or someone here in this text I found very much uh, talks about Tony. And so kind of creating a connection, a memory there with imaginary, like what was the wonderful memories there with Tony, or with someone in real life, where you have wonderful memories with that specific person. And then someone who's only yours. So again, that someone is Tony. So finding something that makes you feel like, someone who's only yours, someone completely new. You can be yourself, you can be your new self. When you sometimes move from one place to another, you do change, you meet new people, maybe you have more space to really unfold and to find yourself. And for someone to bring that out in you can also be really wonderful. And then you realize that this is where your life is. So you realize that this is your home, and it has become your home, which, if you move from one country to the next, that it can be a complete and full process. And then there's also other things you can play with the text. So she wants to impress her message, so there's some directness that you maybe want to put into this text. Some directness, being like, I want you to understand this will be hard, but it won't kill you. And then being a bit more vulnerable, being a bit more soft with the approach, because you want to also bring the emotions in and be like, hey, I've been in this situation, like, trust me. And you can play with that one way or another, like taking the text and using one objective, using one emotion for one go, and then for the next go do a different approach, and then play with these, and then kind of having that all in your memory, having practiced that, then when you like perform it, or go to the audition with whatever text you have, then you can just use your intuition. Because for me, I find when you do text analysis, okay, can be a bit more rational, but also, again, when you start looking at text, you feel a connection with that. That's more intuitive. How do you want to say it? Where do you put your emphasis and all of that? So it is helpful to have all this and practiced all this, but also being able to leave it at the door, not being too rigid with it, and allowing yourself to play and use your intuition, right? And yeah, that's kind of my take on that scene from Brooklyn. I'd love to hear from you. Did I mention things that you didn't agree with, or were there things that I didn't mention that you kind of saw realize when you read through that text? Because of course every person has a different unique experience, and that's why I think, as actors, always bring a unique approach to the scene. Like, you can give 5 people the same scene and everyone will interpret it a bit differently. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. So I'd love to know what you think and what your thoughts are on this monologue. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful day. Bye.